I'm Shane Quinlan. I'm the VP of Product at Kion. And with me today, I'm super excited to have Andrew Marcantel, Executive Director of Solutions Engineering at Texas A&M and a happy customer. For full transparency, Andrew has generously agreed to share his experience with all of you here. His team worked through our Internet to Net Plus partnership to directly acquire Kion, but we're super excited to have Andrew here and to share together how we think about creating more confidence in the cloud. Let me get this up here. So what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about enabling cloud confidence, which sounds lofty, but it's a very real and pressing need. It's not just about having good vibes. It's about having a system that has the ability to maintain itself over time and have folks feel confident in using the cloud to power what they're doing in their higher education institution, in their state and local government. So when we start talking about how to get after that, today we're going to break it up into a couple sections. So we're going to do some intros, some overview. That's where we're at right now. Then we're going to talk a bit about how we build cloud expertise, deliver value, and how that builds towards confidence. Andrew's going to share some of what he's learned working at Texas A&M, building out an automation-first approach. Then we'll break it down a little bit, talk about the principle of guardrails, not gatekeepers, how Kion helps enable that across financial and compliance aspects of cloud operations, and then we're going to open up for a conversation. So I'm very excited about what you all are interested in learning about. I know Kyla gave some of the intro pieces about how you can stay involved through polls and how you can ask questions as well. So again, like I can talk, I know Andrew can talk too. We're interested in having a conversation as well. With that, we've done our intros, so let me jump right into what we see as some of those high-level cloud challenges working in higher ed and state government. So the challenges are multitude, right? Like we tend to sort of wrap it up under the language of it's a cloud thing, but we know that cloud permeates across so much of our business, so much of our organization, so much of what we're trying to achieve, because it's this underlying technology that enables all these new processes. You know, cloud was never about just moving things out of the data center just because. It was about a new way of enabling technology that lets us take advantage of elastic compute and services available through hyperscalers and being able to manage everything through configuration and a lot more. So what are we trying to solve for? We're trying to grow skill sets, and we're trying to do it across cloud service providers. There is not one cloud service provider to rule them all, and that means we need to be able to build skills where we need the technologies that are available from each provider. We also need to be able to set up access to accounts. We need to make sure that we have folks who can get access when they need it, not a month after they join onto the organization, not a month after they get their research grant. As soon as they're ready to hit go, that we can support the needs of that user. We want to make sure it's self-service. We don't want to be, you know, folks behind the curtain pushing tickets along. We want to make sure that we have a model that lets people serve themselves, that provides the automation behind it to make stuff easy to get done. We want to make sure that we're aligning to compliance standards. We have legal and regulatory standards that we have to live up to in almost every business, but in particular in higher ed and state. And we have to make sure that not only are we setting proactive controls, but we're tracking that over time and able to support that audit process, whether that's monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever it is that we're required to report out on. We've got spend thresholds we want to be able to set. We've got data retention and classification risk. There is so much that is hard to do when it comes to managing cloud in higher education, in state government. But the goal is kind of simple, right? Secure, repeatable cloud operations aligned to budget. That's what we're aiming towards. So I'm here with Kion, and I know I kind of went into, I'm the vice president of Kion, and we're here with Kion, but I want to take a step back and just introduce what Kion is. So Kion is a multi-cloud governance software that helps bring together visibility, guidance, automation, controls to help you take advantage of everything that's out there from the major cloud service providers, Azure, Google Cloud, and AWS, and stitch it together into a cohesive way of managing cloud operations across compliance, financials, and orchestration. There's a couple things that make Kion unique. The first is that we are more than just a report and remediate tool. We go beyond just notifications and creating more work to be done. We actually help prevent work from happening in the first place, or at least busy work from happening in the first place. We also install self-hosted SaaS. So that means that you get to own the data and the application, the upgrade path, all of it. That means that you don't have to worry about sharing the keys to the kingdom for your cloud estate with a single tenant SaaS solution. We also have a very specific philosophy about how we provide access to cloud tools. So we give users direct access to cloud native services through Kion. We are not a catalog. We are not some tool that you use. Instead of the CSP interface, we want to make sure we give users access to the AWS Management Console or the AWS CLI or the Google portal to make sure that they can actually get in and do the things on those cloud native tools that they need to do, not making it this opaque system that they have to work through. And we're also building for a lot of different user personas inside Kion. We have very technical users who interact with Kion essentially as an automation platform, mostly at the command line, using things like our Terraform provider to automate everything that they want to do so that it fires off at the push of a button, integrates with CI/CD pipelines, integrates with your ITSM, all of that. We also have folks that need to send a report to their boss once a month. And we have everything in between. And so Kion is unique too in that we help speak to all sides of that spectrum of need when it comes to building out cloud operations. And with that, we will start with our first poll. So for folks doing CPE and for other folks who would like to stay engaged, what barriers to cloud adoption are faced by your organization? Awesome. All right. While you're answering that poll, I will keep the ball rolling. So when I start talking about, or when I think about building expertise in cloud and getting folks to this higher state of where things happen automatically and we don't have to think too much about the busy work and we can focus on the more important aspects of our business, I start to think about unicorns. And I know that's silly, and I know this image is ridiculous, but stick with me. So in my real world experience, I have led 3 different cloud migrations across various different industries in healthcare, in government, and it's always a trip. Now that I'm in this role with Kion, where I get to work with organizations that are in all kinds of different states in terms of their cloud journey, I get to see both what's unique and what's shared. And, in my experience, I remember having my boss coming to me, a young product manager, and saying, hey, how much is your team spending on cloud? And to just be able to answer that question was so challenging. I mean, weeks talking about what permissions were needed for product managers, how we wanted to systematize that, how we wanted to hand them out, whether it was even something that product managers needed to do. Couldn't I just send you a screenshot from Cost Explorer and you can just use that to figure out what's going on? It was so painful, exceptionally painful. And then I also remember, we were working in an organization doing a lot of analytics, and we were like, all right, we want the machine learning group to take advantage of all the cool things available on Google Cloud. And from the IT organization, we were like, all right, cool. We've never done Google Cloud before, so we're just going to set something up for them, and they're going to manage it. So we're going to have the data science team over there, and we're going to do our own thing over here. And that split in terms of what capabilities different parts of the organization had access to, how they had access to it, how it was managed, how it was audited, how it was controlled, came back to bite us again and again. And part of the problem is that we felt like we didn't have the talent needed to understand and manage all these different pieces. Somebody who was an expert in AWS and Google Cloud and Azure and also knew how to build the kinds of service that we needed for our customers, for our users, for our mission. And that's rare. Like, that unicorn is exceptionally rare. I'm not saying they don't exist. I've met them. They are special and their horns are bright and shiny, but there aren't enough of them to go around. So what do we have to do? We have to build more unicorns. And by that, I mean we have to build teams of people that know how to take advantage of all these skills. And we have to make it easier to build them. It cannot be this special exalted thing, this special process, this thing of trial by fire, where it takes them 10 years to build the expertise. We have to be able to trust users to get into cloud systems, to learn how they work, and to start taking advantage of the technology without worrying that it's going to break our compliance regime, lead to insecurity, or spiral out of control with spend. So, okay, great. And it's one thing to say like we should give people access and we should build up their skills, but most people want to learn hands-on, which means trusting them to start playing with the toys before you're totally certain about how to control it. And so sometimes you start to feel like there's this paradox between making sure that people have access, but also not increasing your organizational risk, not increasing access, as broadly as possible so that it starts to degrade your actual security posture because you're not sure who's doing what, where, and when. But you also can't hold back access. It's a yes and moment. We should be able to provide access to people so they can get hands-on, so they can start learning and they can start using, and they can start doing it fast, quickly, and effectively without increasing our risk posture. And I think that like starting to see it less as a paradox and more about how to build securely and provide access securely gets you to this place where you realize it's not a paradox. It's yes and. So this brings us to our second poll. So again, for folks doing a CPE or for folks who want to continue to tag along, this is our next poll question. What is your biggest challenge facing cloud services staffing? Second to absorb. Awesome. Shane continues. So when we talk about this, being able to provide access, making sure that it's done secure, we start talking about guardrails. And it's very important to distinguish between guardrails and gatekeepers. Gatekeepers say no. Gatekeepers say you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't have access to that, you must go through me. Guardrails say have fun, but you can't go outside the boundaries of the guardrails. And having that perspective changes the way that you can think about providing access to people and letting them run wild without actually running wild. So this ability to get to a governed by default posture really relies on automation. You have to put automation first and central to the way that you think about providing cloud as a service to your folks in your organization who can use it to provide services to your customers, your constituents, your students, your researchers, and make sure that every new account, every role, every user, every resource just adds value, not risk. Value, which is the true point of the cloud, to empower that agility to do more faster. And if you can't break anything, you can actually start to learn without the risk of super failure. No existential threat. No, we're going to run out of funding in a weekend. No, we're going to breach our compliance program. Just access and learning and value creation without that. And as a cloud operations team, that allows you to shift from playing whack-a-mole with problems to teaching best practices, to building a cloud strategy towards focusing on these higher order problems. And that's super exciting. So to talk more about an automation first approach to cloud operations, I'll pass the mic to my good friend, Andrew Marcantel. Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Shane. I have had the opportunity to be working with Kion or CloudTamer originally when we first started this journey about 2 years ago, somewhere around there. And I can't talk about this without a little bit explaining what Texas A&M is going through, has been going through for about 1.5 years now, with regards to consolidation and how this has been relevant to our cloud journey. Now, Shane took a little bit of my little thunder away talking about how we solve the unicorn problem, how we get past that. And so my screen, the screen background I have in the background is a little bit of a reminder that part of the process is to transport them to a new way of doing business. So this is a Stargate, comes from a show that was on Sci-Fi Network for a long time, for those who don't know it. But the idea is a wormhole that takes you to a different part of the universe. And so I like to think of that our journey at Texas A&M into being this large monolithic idea of what could be was really a journey into something new and, well, not experienced before. So we were just exploring new worlds together. So Texas A&M is the largest single single located institution in the country. We're now at 78,000 students. And we're kind of famous for our Corps of Cadets, one of 6 that are like it in the country. We're also R1. I think we're somewhere right around $1 billion in research, which is interesting because that's a big part of what drove us to the cloud to begin with in 2020. So I was hired to kind of put some framework, some structural framework behind our cloud journey that was starting around that time right before COVID. And part of that idea was to build a automation orchestration first kind of mentality, but we did not want to have vendor lock-in as a big deal with regards to how we build our vendor partnerships in the state of Texas in general. And so we chose a multi-cloud strategy because it allowed us to be, well, let's just say, flexible with regards to our delivery of the technology from an on-prem to a cloud-based perspective. So we wanted to have the ability to choose, either Azure, AWS, or Google, and not differentiate between the services that we provide and provide the same kind or even better service that we're providing on-prem. And our on-prem environment was run by a hypervisor VMware environment with some Hyper-V from Microsoft sprinkled in, but was mainly done on-prem with a new data center. But we still found that it was not flexible enough to where we were headed from a framework perspective. Now, we've done a lot of work to build those frameworks in the cloud and apply them on-prem, but fundamentally, we still are transporting them into a Moon model of business. So A&M was, and this is how I describe it before we move on to the next slide, A&M was really 33 different businesses that kind of acted a lot like a small business consortium. And so the joke I was kind of making to another partner the other day was, it's like we had a big conference with a bunch of small businesses, put them into a conference room, and then closed the doors, and then told the consultant, tell them they're all going to work for us. So that's kind of how all they reacted. Right. So how do you get 33 different businesses with their all expectations, their own compute management, their own way of doing businesses? Some use Ansible, some use Salt, some use PowerShell, maybe the old standby scripts that they had been using for years. How do we build this into a common framework? So we're moving to the cloud. We're going to use all 3. So the very first thing that we thought of, which was, let's develop an orchestration framework to apply it, and then good practices built upon that. So the first technology we really chose was Terraform. And so this was kind of based on the concept that we were going to use runbooks and playbooks from Ansible that some of our staff had been using in a diverse capacity prior, but we could use a common framework to apply this orchestration automation to the environments we were applying them into. So Terraform was our first major decision, but then it very quickly realized that we're running a business almost like an MSP. So we need to, as soon as we chose the framework to apply these technologies into the native environments from our own orchestration models, and at the end of this, I might be able to show a little bit of how we do this, but then we chose our financial management model. So I'm telling this story because I want you to understand how Kion provides value from the decision points that we arrived at to saying there's a single platform that we can do these things that we built autonomously ourselves as we move to our cloud journey. So finance was the next big part of it, and so I have to deal with the cloud or a chargeback model in the state of Texas. Is not just A&M; it's everywhere. So at least in the state. So we're focusing on being able to collect accurate information on their compute and usage, your utility usage, and being able to charge it back at no residual overhead. But I have to be precisely accurate to how we do that. So there's ways you can pull it out from the native environment through their APIs, their native APIs. And so we purchased another product at the time that could provide us that accounting and reporting for chargeback purposes. So we built that framework. We chose Terraform. We chose our cloud financial management model. And then we started to apply this into a mechanism that allow people to go to a front door portal. We use ServiceNow as our ITSM tool. And so we built a form that allows us to collect certain information, financial information, their security posture, their data classification. So are they fairly low risk or fairly high risk on the data classification? And then to a certain degree, the structure of the business they want to apply, and then they would create either an account in AWS, a subscription in Azure, or a project in Google. So we built this automation ourselves within a combination of ServiceNow and in a little bit of GitHub and Terraform GitHub Actions to execute those account creations locally. Then we would apply certain controls upon those within the native environment. So as you're starting to hear this story, we're doing this times 3. the scale of complexity is growing. And so I have a whole spiel that says you can be complex and you be complicated when you combine them. So complex is number of parts in the system. Complicated is the interdependency of those parts. You put them together and it becomes fragile. So I started understanding that we were building an increasingly fragile system, that it has a bunch of automation kind of orchestration built in at little parts along the way, right? But it's like I had to go to one place, to go to another place, to go to another place, to see all of those increasingly complex orchestration models see itself to fruition to the point where we could execute it in the environment. And then we started looking at other cloud management platform tools, and these are the things that I needed. I needed a single portal that could do orchestration, could do compliance, and do financial management. And that's exactly what Kion provided. And we had looked at them originally, way back when it was CloudTamer, on the financial management part, and the financial management was somewhat there, not quite what we were expecting. But I saw this security posture management. There's CPSM tools, I think, security posture management tools, and I was like, I need to pay attention to that because I'm going to be coming back to this in a year. And sure enough, about a year later, I was shopping for a security posture management tool, and I reminded myself that CloudTamer did that. That was about the time they did the rebrand, and I was like, this is one environment that will do all of the things we're trying to do from a financial, a posture and security management standpoint, from a business governance standpoint. And I'll talk. I'll end with a little bit of a business structure. The last kicker is that we were trying to use, at least in AWS, we were trying to use Control Tower to manage some of our business structure. With regards to different security controls in one business structure versus the other. And it turned out that the guardrails within the native Control Tower in AWS were not as flexible as we needed them to be. And Kion abstracted that to allow us to provide different policies that were built on the same structure on all three together into one. So again, we have now an ability to apply business level compliance controls in a multi-cloud capacity in a way that is abstracted and not vendor driven. And that's kind of what led us to the Kion solution being together. Now, again, this was done as a part of a larger Internet 2 consortium. Internet 2 does a lot of things, but they're kind of friendly to higher ed because we all tend to get together and build networks together with Internet 2. But this was done as kind of an initiative to say, hey, if a couple of these institutions, Penn State was another one, that were looking at this to solve multiple problems with regards to how do we approach the cloud in a uniform framework driven model, Kion is a portal to doing that. And that's kind of why I make the joke about Stargate, which is this becomes the portal to your ability to get into the cloud in an orchestrated way that's repeatable and provides better default value. I have a different one. We built a curated images for our server team, and it's all about creating better defaults, right? So the value in this platform is that the technicians managing the environments, customers want the same experience, whether or not we're managing it or not, but better defaults get us to that delivery of execution faster, more reliably, and more resiliently, right? So this is the kind of thing you're doing. So the unicorn, the Stargate takes you to the unicorn, or maybe the unicorn turns the Stargate on, but that's the point. I mean, that we're trying to get to better defaults. And how do we do this? We do this through orchestration. And the more uniform framework you apply to that orchestrated model, right, through the technologies I've kind of described, which was Terraform and some of the CPS security posture management approaches, that you can take away some of the native tools that you're dependent upon within the environment. Again, Control Tower being an example of one of those, and using those native security control policies, PMs. I can never get the acronyms right, but the security control policies are now abstracted to Kion, and they'll work that for you. Oh, but by the way, you can use those same policies for similar policies for other environments. So this was all predicated on the fact that we're consolidating 33 different units. We want to have one cloud, common cloud experience. We wanted to use the same baselines and security postures, the same financial management, the same account creation process among the multi-clouds, and do them in a one capacity model that allows change to be, let's just say, not replicated, but managed in one context. And Kion allows us to do that. So I think I've kind of talked about a lot of the whys and how we, as an environment at Texas A&M arrived at Kion, what value it's creating, and where we have to go, at least from a framework standpoint, where we hope to go to the future. Now, are we all there? No, this is a multi-year, multi-collaborative environment that we have to work with our customers slowly but surely. You know, when you throw down the CIS framework on some of these environments, you're like, well, why do I need to turn off the default VPC because I need to get to S3 and open up that website? Well, no, that default VPC is probably not your best path, especially if that VPC is pointing back to campus. So we need to do this in a better way. We need to have better defaults. We're going to make this secure for you, and you're going to meet your customers where you need. So that's a little bit of the A&M journey. I've probably gone over my time, but I wanted to kind of explain that a little bit as we go into the next part. Thank you, Shane.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. Now I can't unpicture Jack O'Neill in an inflatable unicorn suit walking through the Stargate. So
I think he would carry that pretty well. I think
so too. So building off what Andrew said, like, you know, as you're building through the implementation, I know Andrew talked about fragility, but we also have talked with folks who are seeing, it just feels like the way that they're trying to wrangle those pieces of what's happening in cloud becomes more and more and more challenging. And the way that maturity and scaling happens in cloud, we know happens in fits and starts and sometimes backwards the way it should. You scale way before you set central controls, or you set central controls before you've migrated anything out of the data center. But a lot of times you start to get to this place where it feels like the threads are unraveling. Spend's out of control. The accounts are proliferating. Payers are proliferating. Compliance is there, but do we think about that before we got started, or do we have to fix it after the fact? And you know, you bring in more tooling, and sometimes it just starts to create more work, where you have to get an additional queue of work around what you need to remediate and what you need to fix. And then we always know that resources are constrained. Ultimately, what our organizations serve in cloud operations is enabling the mission, enabling how we can serve our constituents, enabling how we can serve our students and our researchers and our staff. It's not so much about making cloud better. Like, that's not our core raison d'etre as cloud operations. We're here to serve the bigger mission. So we always have resource constraints, but we got to make sure that that works for us and works for the people that are working with us. And I think the biggest thing, you know, my big takeaway is we talked about building expertise, but the flip of that is building value. And I know that the DevOps infinity symbol gets used and abused, but I think it's an excellent illustration to sort of understand how CloudOps sits at the center of this loop between how we build value and how we build expertise, to build more value, to build more expertise, to build more value, to build more expertise. And at the center of that, what CloudOps really helps create is that confidence. That is the purpose. That's the reason for our teams. It's the reason for what Kion does. It's about building that confidence that your users can go out and accomplish building value without having to worry too much about what that means from a risk perspective. And that also you're enabling more folks to take advantage of that capability, to drive more value creation, to be this force multiplier, this reinforcing feedback loop between more folks who understand how to get after it and more getting done. And when it comes to building expertise, we talk about guardrails, this by default, this governed by default, being able to minimize risk, simplify management, and build trust because you know that what you're building is secure by default, or budgeted by default, or compliant by default. And getting to that better by default standpoint lets you build that confidence to deliver on the value that lets you build the teams. So, guardrails, not gatekeepers. We can help manage financial security, identity, and compliance risks in one control plane with good governance, and a governed by default implementation helps you stop playing whack-a-mole. Not immediately, not magically. It doesn't solve everything with a total silver bullet, but this flipped automation first starts to enable a pattern and a new way of thinking that lets you establish better patterns that are more sustainable over the future and scale better without having to add people. And that is a much more survivable, thrivable system for the way that we can get after accomplishing better cloud operations. So a couple examples of how this kind of works with Kion. So from problems to solutions to outcomes that you can actually see. What we see in the way that guardrails get applied is that an example of overspending. You know, run into the situation where somebody does something, you didn't realize that a Lambda is creating a database that's getting loaded, that's calling a Lambda that's creating a database that's getting loaded, and all of a sudden you come back in on a Monday and you're like, what is that? From a spend standpoint. What Kion enables you to do is to set budgets to make sure that projects don't go off track, set enforcements to make sure that you can tell when a budget is starting to get hit, or even start taking action like shutting down resources or turning things off overnight. And that enables users to experiment and practice without worrying about something that they forgot or didn't clean up or was expensive and they didn't realize it during the implementation. It helps act as a security against that. Another one we help with is overprivileged access. A lot of times you see, I didn't know exactly how to give them the right controls, so I kind of gave them admin over here, but it's cool. We'll just make sure they don't break anything. I know that that's not a best practice. We know that that's not the way it should work, but sometimes it can be really challenging to understand the specific needs and demands of a system. So we see things like someone who's doing some BI work just needs read-only access to the data in some bucket, and we don't really have something pre-built for that, and so we kind of give them read-write instead. We didn't need to give them read. So this whole idea of how do you set up least privilege by default. In Kion, we have a couple systems to help support that. We provide single sign-on for all the major cloud providers, so you can federate into the native consoles, and we can tie that back to your IDMS. So if you want to use Okta or OneLogin or tie it all the way back to your AD or LDAP, you can make sure that that's what's driving what users get access to. So you're managing it from a central system instead of all over the place. And then we can help set the policies and controls around that to make sure the users have exactly what access they need, when they need it, to what they need, and no more. Misconfiguration happens too. You'll see someone who has like an S3 bucket and it's, does it need to be public? Probably not. Was it set public? It probably was, but that's okay because we can now catch that. Automation helps ensure that policies are set to make sure that things like no S3 bucket in this space ever gets publicly exposed, ever. And to make sure that over time that doesn't change. So you can make sure that there isn't drift that happens over time and that baseline, even though it was set initially, changes and now has to be reset. Kion lets users provision resources in new accounts without freaking out about misconfiguration, letting you build, not break. And then compliance too. We start to see things where you have resources that have are tied back to funding from like NIH, and they have HIPAA controls, and you have to make sure that you're encrypting PHI properly, but it's not actually happening. So how do you make sure that we don't create systems that aren't applying those standards by default? We have a number of features inside Kion, including jump starts that have pre-built compliance program resources that set proactive controls and also checks after the fact to make sure that not only do you start compliant, but you stay compliant. And that means users can build without always worrying about compliance and always fearing and going back to those big, long checklists of all the things that must be done in order to maintain a control family, a compliance program. Anything they aren't supposed to do, they can't do. And that's super powerful. And this brings us to our third and final poll. So again, for folks doing the continuing, the CPE credits, this is our third and final poll. What is your biggest challenge facing cloud service delivery? I'll leave it here for folks to read that, absorb that, get a chance to fire off a poll response. Cool. All right. So we talked about a lot. There's a lot more to unpack too. When I start thinking about best practices, we talked a lot about guardrails, but it's bigger than that too. When I talk about my best practices, I talk about 4 things. The first is putting people first. We exist to serve people. Everything that we do is about serving people. And we need to make sure we put people first, not in the way that we provide services through cloud, but also in the way that we let people build on cloud too. That means rapid provisioning so users don't have to wait longer than they actually need. It means letting people learn hands-on, and also means designing systems with empathy, understanding what those constituents need in order to do the work, understanding, as someone is trying to ask for an account, what it means to them, how they frame it, what their language is, so we don't create systems that become impediments just because we don't understand where our cloud users are coming from. We've talked about guardrails a ton in this presentation, but that really allows teams to be accountable and individuals to be accountable for what they're doing. It lets you run policies over everything. Policies rule the world instead of letting notifications and tickets run the world. And by setting inherited controls, saying these are our top level cannot, like non-negotiables, and then rolling that down through the organization makes it easy to ensure that the right policies are set as you build out more pieces of your organization. We want to make sure we start with continuous processes. Automation first, self-documenting, transparent monitoring. It can't start with a every 6 months we'll do X process. You have to start with continuous. Support that from the beginning, and it makes your life so much easier down the road. And then making sure we're setting up systems that keep it repeatable. So you can share best practice. So if someone does something awesome in one account on one resource, that we can take advantage of that everywhere. That we can use cloud native tools, not some specific vendor-y thing that you can't really apply or has constraints or you're waiting on a code change. Cloud native tooling that lets you share and repeat and continue to use that on those cloud services forever and ever. And then ensuring that we're able to build everything as code, from compliance to financials to account creation and everything else. Those are the things that are going to enable that combination of guardrails and agility. So we've done a lot of talking about high level and how that works. I want to do a really quick walkthrough of kind of what that looks like in Kion. And then I want to open up for questions, start the conversation going, and then hopefully have time for Andrew to walk through some of what they're doing at Texas A&M as well. So without further ado, I'll turn off the PowerPoint. Voila. All right, this is a live demo. This is a real environment. This is Kion actually managing cloud resources. So this is the typical product manager teeing up a live demo spiel. But without further ado, welcome to Kion. I know login screens aren't super exciting, but what I will call out is that being able to set up SSO for the authentication piece of this is huge. So you don't have to set up a whole new thing. You can tie everything you do in cloud to the systems that you already have managing access to everything else, which is super powerful. When you jump into Kion for the first time, it's going to bring you to your dashboard, and that's your high-level things that you want to see. So we're going to look at spend. We're going to see where things are going with compliance. We've got some notifications going on that we might need to address. We also have some quick cloud access. So if I am logging into Kion and I just want to jump into my account and I want to get to work, I can just click and do that. So for a lot of our users, Kion really is just that front door to the cloud. It gives you that context you need, but it lets you jump right into getting the work done. And it doesn't just have to be through the management console. You can also generate short-term access keys if you need to, hop into and out of projects as needed. But those cloud access rules let us tie your enterprise account to a user, to a role within a project that is bound by policies that make sure they get access to what they need, when they need it, how they need it, and no more. And if you have existing roles, it would make it really easy for you to import that and use those as well. So it's not just something where you have to use Kion created roles or anything like that. But all that said, I think the most powerful way of looking at Kion is looking at the org chart. It's not the only way, but it is the most powerful way because I think it does a good job of explaining how we can help you get a common view of what your entire organization looks like, and then pop from there. So we're going to start here on policy. You'll see policy, spend, and compliance. And I start with policy because it starts to show you the power of that automation first approach. Here you'll see our cloud rules, and cloud rules are policy definitions that you can set in Kion that actually drive cloud native specific tooling behind the scenes. So whether it's ARM templates in Azure, Google IAM policies, or CFTs and SCPs on the AWS side, those cloud rules are how we define the specific controls around each of these spaces and apply them automatically as we set up and build across the organization. You'll see here all of my accounts across AWS, Azure, and Google managed in one place. And across each of these organizational units, you can start to see how I'm applying cloud rules and how that rolls out through the company. So here I've got my non-negotiables. We're going to use this golden AMI. We're going to not let users use non-US regions on AWS. And here's my company A security baseline. These are my non-negotiables. And from there, we can start to tailor what gets inherited, which are my non-negotiables, and then what we can set locally at each of these different levels. So as we get into R&D, we're going to add compliance. So this is CMMC2, but it could be HIPAA, it could be NIST, it could be whatever control standard you want to be working towards. We have a bunch of out-of-the-box compliance jumpstarts that help you create some of the initial resources, tune them to your organization, and then get running with some of the compliance program and also the supporting documentation to help you maintain what you need from an evidentiary and auditing support standpoint, which is huge. Even some example responses about how you can send that back to your auditors, which as someone who has managed many compliance programs, having somebody hand that to me is such a lifesaver. But you'll see as we go through the organization, we're adding more layers. So on a government project, we're going to add FedRAMP controls. On a biomedical, we're going to add some HIPAA controls. This is my more controls I'm going to add there. And as we get into biomedical, maybe we start to layer it on. So we're restricting non-HIPAA approved services. We've also inherited all these other controls from above. And that brings us down to the projects themselves. And the projects are where the actual accounts live. And Kion is super powerful because it not only lets you pull in the accounts that you have, but it lets you vend accounts too and tie that into your ITSM. So if you want to create, spin up, ship accounts with all this stuff prepackaged, as long as you build it underneath this organizational structure, you can use Kion as your account vending and provisioning system, which is pretty powerful. And so as you get into each of these projects, you can start to see how at the project we're helping understand and map what's going on, track all the resources, give users access to each of the specific areas based on the type of access they need, map and manage and add accounts as we need to, set financials, define savings opportunities where there's a chance to save money, set enforcements to make sure that you don't spend too much. And we can also start turning off resources, manage cloud rules, like all these layers of cloud rules that are applied across the organization, track compliance, not only against standards, but to understand the criticality of different findings and how we can address that. Users, permissions, notes, just whole shebang. And I do that really quickly just because all that detail is there, but it's all underneath this org chart that lets you set and inherit all these policies down and out. And we do a very similar thing when it comes to managing spend. So if you want to, for the last month, understand how you're doing across the organization, you can set all kinds of different controls. So we grew up working in the government space, but we also have tons of commercial customers as well. And so when it comes to budgeting, we have a lot of flexibility. We can run projects without budgets. We can let individual teams set projects on each of their budgets and it rolls up against a larger threshold. We can set very specific funding sources that are tied to specific contract vehicles that show every single penny that gets distributed down across the organization. All of that and everything in between supported in Kion. So we certainly understand where there might be really heavy constraints and a very specific way of rolling out funding, but we also have the ability to support really flexible plans to help meet you where you are, like Andrew said. And then we do something similar with compliance too, where you can start to understand your overall compliance picture and how that's impacted down and across the organization to see where you're seeing the most risk, how you can address that, and then build that into your operations flows as well. So if you want to have users submit suppression requests, if they have a finding that they actually have a good justification for, you can do that through Kion or through third-party ITSM findings or ITSM integrations, whatever works for you. And we can also pull in third-party compliance findings as well. Done it with Tenable and we've done it with other solutions too, which is really great in terms of giving you a single place to pull all this together. And I think it's also—
Yeah, I want to bring up that last point, that suppression. The suppression is usually done from the back end. This was one of the only tools that we saw that allowed the user, meaning the administrator of the environment for that particular unit, that account, to issue basically a workflow request to suppress a finding. So that's pretty powerful. That allows autonomy to the user to control their own environment. If they know something about the compliance environment that the auditor or because you're using to a certain degree the robot does not know what you know. And as long as we understand that appreciation to say, okay, tell us what we don't know, Kion acts as a bridge in that capacity. So that's not a trivial statement. It gets passed on very quickly, but it's important to know that you want dynamic information through this tool, right, to allow you to better support your customer.
Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate that. It's nice to see the love felt as someone who worked on that feature. So, yeah, Yeah, I mean, there's a ton to unpack inside Kion. You can vend accounts, you can look at individual resources, you can do reporting and understand, what you're spending across each of your OUs or projects. You can get as deep as you want to or as narrow as you want to, and you can tie all that back with our public API into the automation systems you have in place. Or if you are a true lover of Terraform, we have a Terraform provider that a lot of customers are using that makes that really easy to just never leave Terraform and still get all the power of Kion. So to have all of that in one compact little bundle is pretty powerful. And that's really what we're most excited about inside Kion is how we can help support some of those needs, whether it's just, hey, I need to give this report on spend by service and understand what's driving most cost every month and show that side by side, or whether it's I need to make sure that there's a new policy that rolls out this new change to this compliance standard that's happening in the next 6 weeks. So all of that and everything in between. I know I got to play showing a bit of a demo. Andrew, if you don't mind me mixing it up, I think it would actually be more fun, and I think we have time for it to take a spin through what you've been able to do with Texas A&M and then switch to discussion if you're up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen. This won't take long because I'd like to get into the Q&A part, but what you're looking at here is my ServiceNow form. Look, it's nothing special, right? You don't need a unicorn to create this part. I'll tell you what the unicorn comes in later. This guy named Blake, you'll see it under is a demo account. So we collect information that's pertinent to what we need our environment to collect. So obviously the requests are this famous account number, that's the Texas A&M, it's actually an old mainframe concept. That's our billing account, right? So the department they're coming from, who the owners of the environment will be, so who we create accounts for. We have a taxonomy for naming the accounts. You'll understand that in a minute. And then the important part is we're gathering their data classification. I'm not going to walk you through this process, but basically we really care if it's research driven. We really care if it's ITAR controlled. We really care if it's HIPAA or it's some sort of, we don't do much, what was the credit card one? I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but we really do care about FERPA. We really do care about HIPAA, and we do really care about ITAR. So when they fill out their little form, they're going to get one of these public, which is like a common, let's just say truly state of Texas public website kind of thing. University internal, which often is just stuff that goes on internally, accounting, internal activities that we need to care about, but really nobody else would care about it. Confidential, those will be things I mentioned, which will be HIPAA, some FERPA, and then the critical is the ITAR, right? So this is filled out, and then it gets put into a repository in GitHub. So I'm very briefly going to show you this so you can understand it. We have a structure behind it, but this gets imported into a state or into a repository in GitHub, and then we start to build Terraform to create a state file. So I just want to show you the structure behind it real fast. With the account information is dumped into a comment. It always slows down when you're doing a presentation. So here are the many accounts we do. We're going to pick on our unicorn, which is Blake. This is his demo account. And this is, we have an account Terraform file and then the definition YAML file. I want to show you the YAML. Here's the information we collected from the form, and it's ready to go. And here's, you see that university internal, which is classification plus the billing account and the budget, right? The budget is important because that's to a certain degree how you could set up your account management, your OU structure at the top of your tree. So you do, depending on how you do your budgeting, this might be important if it's a top down or a floating. What's the name that you guys used, Shane, on the floating budget model, which I think was one of our requests, where you can disassociate the budget from the top of the tree down. I can't remember what that was called, but the short of it is you have two different budgeting models, and you can set alerts on both, but you can set it up to where it takes from the zero sum model, so everything feeds up from the bottom, must add up to the top of the tree. So you're seeing this. It is then put into a account Terraform file that then is run through GitHub Actions and creates the environment. Now, currently we do this in the native environment, but very shortly we're going to do this through Kion. So again, I'm not trying to scare you. You might have one as good to play off the uniform theme that Shane is kind of articulated. You might have one unicorn that can do this, right? So the good news is that you only need to do this one time. This structure, this framework, that you see how we have this workflow of how the data in the orchestration is built out in our environment. We're moving this from because we have 3 different types of orchestrated models. We're using Kion to condense it into one, and this is the model that's being built out. So let me stop presenting this one and give you one last one and see if I can bring it up here. So no, that's not the right one. That's my thread. So okay, so here we have our cloud management, and I want to show you this a little bit. Is that we use a common framework called CIS, common. What does it stand for? I can't understand what the I stands for, but trust me, if you Google CIS, it's a common security framework that we're using and importing into Kion, and that gives us some of what Shane already showed, right? So it shows us the standards, but then I wanted to show you guys specifically how it applies to Blake's account in the capacity that we used it for. But again, as it always does this when you want to do it. Okay, so let me go here. No, I thought it was in here that I could show the projects that was being impacted upon. So let's go find Blake. And maybe I needed the accounts actually. So I did do this. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, because I did run this through right before. So we're applying a common security framework upon the account that was imported through orchestration. And then the compliance check is run. In this capacity, once I find Blake's account, there it is, right? Here we see some of the events that have been found within that environment doing its check. So it goes from the way he's using port 22, a few other security group defaults. We're using default groups right now. We're trying to remove those as a part of our initial setup, but in the capacities that we're trying to get away from using default VPCs and default security groups, we need to remove those. CIS finds that and said, probably not a good idea to always use defaults. So these are the kind of things that it can find. I'm just trying to show you a little bit of the power between starting from a web form that it doesn't have to be ServiceNow. It could be Team Dynamics. It could be any number of ITSM tools that will take the data, put it into an orchestrator. It doesn't have to be GitHub. It could be GitLab. It could be Azure DevOps. It could be a number of different entities that do this kind of work. Orchestrate that in a capacity that could be used through the public APIs to be sent to Kion to create the counts and create the compliance framework necessary to do and run scans and checks on. So that's a real quick and dirty example of kind of how we do things at A&M. And we're also improving it. I wouldn't say that, yeah, security for internet. Well, of course it's internet, right? Of course it's the internet. So that's kind of the idea, but it can be done different ways. Don't imply that one way is the only way, and that the way that you see it done in some other GitHub repo or some other vendor that does it, it's not the only way. We started off doing all of this orchestration to the native environment. We're going to start using Kion to be our bridge. But again, it's a cafeteria. It is not a fixed menu, right? So you choose your own adventure. Thanks, Shane.
Absolutely. Thanks, Andrew. All right. At this point, we'd like to actually open it up for a bit more of a Q&A. I've got a question for Andrew to get the ball rolling, but I would love to hear your all's questions to see what we can answer for you, and figure out what we can do there. This is unfortunate, but Kyler or Andrew, I will need some help because apparently I can't access the Q&A module. But if y'all can help me out by calling out questions that come up through there, I'd appreciate it. I just can't see and facilitate. But my question to get started, Andrew, when it came to transitioning from the course that you had to figuring out what to do with Kion, I know you talked a little bit through your thinking there, was the value more in repeatable automation, account setup, or tracking and monitoring cloud spend? How did you balance sort of what your strategic needs were when you got started with that?
Well, it all comes to you at once. You got to solve the whiteboard of building this seems like it's a spaghetti chart, right? Then you would start circling what's the, if you follow the OKR process, objectives, key results, you eventually get to what's really important, and then what's the one that's most important. And I would say overall, repetitively by our constituents, financial management was the number one issue, right? Flexibility, quick and reliable deployment was all part of it. But the advantage that we had is we had 33 different departments with their version of their unicorn. So their attitude was, okay, it'd be great if they all did the same thing. But ultimately, we all have different environments we're operating in. The College of Engineering has a completely different budgetary model than the College of Architecture and then the College of Liberal Arts, right? So you can imagine that we have a very large engineering school that's very well funded from grant perspectives. But even then, the engineering sounds like they got plenty of money, but then you find out that there are incredible strings attached to that money, and they're very diligent. I mean, extremely diligent about how that grant money is used. So we realized we needed to build whatever we did based upon a high degree. I think my partner working through this says the principle of extreme visibility, I think is what he called it. And we approached it from that perspective. We shopped out RFP style a number of vendors to do that transparency of the billing cycle. And it had to be multi-cloud. At the time we were doing it in 2020, there weren't a whole lot of vendors out there doing Google for billing transparency. And as a matter of fact, I do remember Cloud Chamber at the time not having visibility into Google at that moment. They do now, which is why we're having this conversation even today. So having that multi-cloud capacity, orchestration was not the driver. As a matter of fact, I went into this, and my first real big presentation to leadership at the university was, we are not going to say we are cloud first. That is not an accurate approach to what we want. We want to have better defaults through orchestration and automation. If the cloud allows us to get there, we will do that, but not at a price point that does not allow us to make decisions for a better future. Right. So I refused to allow us to get into vendor lock-in. And so that led into more of the default framework orchestration that we have today. So Shane, does that answer your question?
Absolutely. I know we're running up on time here, but one question that I'm seeing, we talked a little bit about what you're doing now. What is Texas A&M working on next? What's the future look like?
Well, from regards to Kion, we're still establishing. We've gotten the control frameworks for security posture management in. I have asked. I've got a number of meetings queued up to talk about reporting and financial visibility. The tool we use now is a little bit more robust than what Kion has. I told the Kion folks I would say this thing. The great thing, and I want to make this a point, because yes, I do not believe that the reporting is quite up to industry standards for financial visibility at the level we need it. Now, I would think that the financial reports that are being provided by Kion right now for most Fortune 500 companies is probably fine. However, because we have to deal with strides in NIH, all the different reporting factors, we have to have reporting that is not normal, not what I would call not standard normal for most industry. And so therefore they're starting to build a reporting engine that allowed us to have a little bit more variability control. So the good news, and this is why I want to bring it up, Kion is a partner. They're not just a vendor. So I have been working with their reporting team at great length to show them a little bit of how we build our reports and why we have them the way we have them. And there's never a no. There's never a, well, it'll be on the fourth quarter of next year. Like, nope, this will go on the list. We're going to prioritize in the capacity that is something we're already working on, and we will give you feedback and update as we're building it out. So I want to also make this point is that at least from the A&M perspective, we have a partner and not a vendor. And that's very important for us to establish the future of where we're headed.
I love that, Andrew. Thank you. I know I made you do all the answering. I really appreciate that. I know we're kind of coming up on time here. Kyla, I know you wanted to be able to take the mic back at some point. I'm not sure if we have any other questions you want to call it as well, but I will cede the floor.
Awesome. Wonderful. So that is all the questions we have for today, but I will go through just our final slide. I do want to take a second to thank you, Andrew and Shane, for being with us this afternoon. That was a really wonderful, engaging presentation. I also want to take a second to thank the participants who joined. We hope the webinar was beneficial to you and your organization. And we do greatly appreciate your feedback. So if you do have an extra moment to stay on the line real quick, we do have a 6-question survey that we would ask you to fill out, and I will be sending it in the chat right now for everyone. And if you have any further questions or would like to request more information, you can feel free to contact Tyler Schwartz via the information on this slide. And thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you all for attending. Thank you.
Thank you all.